الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وصل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبعد inshallah we'll continue the Seerah inshallah. Tomorrow we'll finish inshallah. So tomorrow will be a little bit longer because we're not sure if we're going to be here on Tuesday, whether Tuesday's Eid or not. Inshallah, we'll start with, we'll finish tomorrow, inshallah. You pray? You pray? After? Or you pray after? Alright, Bismillah. Let's start with from new enemies. Zalm, no, go ahead, Bismillah.
New enemies. It might have appeared that the Prophet and his followers, being hundreds of miles away from Mecca, were in a safer position than they previously were in. However, that is not entirely true. In Mecca, there was only one enemy, the Quraysh. In Medina, despite having the strategic advantage of possessing an entire city, two new hostile forces arose, particularly after the Battle of Badr. The first and most dangerous of these enemies came from within. There were still several Arabs in Medina who clung to idol worship and detested Islam, such as Abdullah ibn Ubay and his followers. However, after the victory at Badr, most of them professed to be Muslim, at least outwardly. It was clear from their behavior that true faith had not entered their hearts, but they saw a political advantage of pretending to be Muslim. Several verses of the Quran were revealed informing the true Muslims of the threat of this group of hypocrites posed to the community. However, the Prophet never singled out anyone and taught his followers to judge people by their actions, since only Allah knows their real intentions. Many of these hypocrites secretly conspired with the Quraysh by night, while praying side by side with the Muslims by day.
Okay. They not only conspired with the Quraysh, but they conspired with the Jews as well, or another group that started to, the hostilities increased between the Muslims and the Jews in Medina after the Battle of Badr. Alright, what's the term for hypocrites? What's the term for polytheists? Mushrikun. What's the term for believers?
Mu'minun.
What's the term for immigrants? Muhajirun. Yeah, there's a lot of memes. Right, so I'm just trying to review because sometimes people get these things confused. Alright, the second threat, go ahead.
The second threat came from the Jewish tribes that had lived both inside and around Medina for centuries. They used to live in well-built fortresses that had been constructed to protect them from the majority Arab population. The Jews were the closest to the Muslims in the fundamentals of their faith. They only worshipped Allah and believed in all the prophets up to Musa. The Quran respectfully referred to them, along with the Christians, as people of the book, since they possessed a scripture that originated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Upon arriving in Medina, the Prophet sallallahu, alayhi, wasallam had made a treaty with the Jewish tribes to clearly define relations between them and the Muslims. Among the main elements of the agreement were both the Muslims and Jews were free to practice their own religion. They would mutually support one another in case a foreign enemy attacked, and no treaty would be made with the Quraysh against the Muslims. Some of the Jews even accepted Islam. And one of the leading rabbis of Medina, Abdullah ibn Salam by name, believed that the Messenger of Allah was mentioned in the Torah. However, upon his conversion, he was insulted by the members of his community. Many of the Jews looked down upon the Prophet ﷺ due to their ancestral pride. They were from the lineage of Ishaq, while Mohammad ﷺ was from the lineage of Ismail. In all fairness, the pagan Arabs considered themselves above other people as well, but Islam came to remove all man-made notions of superiority. In a way, it could be said that Jews had issue with the man, rather than the message, while the pagan Arabs had the opposite problem.
The issues with the message, not the man, right? Here, so every nation, and I don't know if it's natural, but Islam came to remove every nation. People at every nation think they're culturally superior to others. It's not right, but it does happen, right? Sometimes when people don't understand something, they deem it as inferior. And Islam came to remove all of that. Islam came to know that every culture is unique, every culture has good aspects, and every culture has bad aspects. The measuring stick is what is aligned with Islam. That's why Islam, how did Islam grow and flourish and spread to so many places? Is because Islam didn't dictate what people to wear, what people to eat. Yes, don't wear silk, don't eat alcohol, don't eat pork. Other than that, you can eat your own customs and cuisines and you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam, that's why it's so beautiful. It's adaptable to everyday age and place. And that's why, alhamdulillah, people gravitated towards Islam. And Abdullah ibn Salam, he accepted Islam because he knew that the signs of the Prophet ﷺ fit the Prophet ﷺ, which is mentioned, الَّذِينَ يَجِدُونَ مَكْتُوبًا عِنْدَهُم فِي التَّوْرَةِ, right? The one they find written with them in the Torah. So he went to them, and before he went to the Prophet ﷺ, and he accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ went, and he hid, and he said, ask them about me before you let them know I accepted Islam. So they said, who is Abdullah ibn Salam to you? So the Jew said, he's the best of us, and his father was the best of us. Right? And then after he accepted Islam, immediately, he's the worst of us, and his father's the worst of us. Right? So, alhamdulillah. That's the thing, subhanAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to be honest. There are things that we may disagree with, right? And things that we may not understand, but just have the honesty to be like, look, I don't get it, right? But I do respect it. And that's something even among ourselves and the discussions that we may have in scholarship, right? There are certain people in terms of scholarship, we may disagree with their conclusions, but at the same time, we have to respect the scholarship that they have. The computer outlet's not working. The input, I sent you a text earlier today. The computer is not working. The screen is for this part, but when you switch the input, it's not working. I checked it earlier today too.
Oh, it's not, but it was working before.
Maybe it was working before. It's not working in 2 hours, as of 2 hours ago. Mine right now. Alright, let's continue with Uzair. Uzair actually raises his hand. It's very nice. What's your hand? I want you guys to raise your hands to I want to see that enthusiasm.
But the Prophet sallallahu continued to teach the Muslims to behave respectfully with them. A revelation later came that Muslims are allowed being slaughtered by the people of the book and even intermarry with them. This was a sign of respect for their religious practices, whose principles generally originated from Allah. In the funeral procession of a Jewish man passed by the Prophet, he would stand up out of respect. It was expected that the same kind of treatment be reciprocated, but it was not to be. Many Jews would pass by the Muslims and say, Assalamu alaikum, meaning peace be upon you. It was a twist of the phrase that Muslims used to greet each other, Assalamu alaikum, meaning peace be upon you. When the Prophet's second wife, Aisha, heard them, she was frustratingly respond, peace be upon you, and may Allah curse you. But the Prophet taught her to remain calm and simply respond with to you too, implying that if they wished peace, then they would receive the same. But if they intended an insult, it would be thrown back at them. The hatred of some of them was so intense that they even used to tell the pagan Arabs that their religion is better than Islam, despite the fact that idol worship is one of the greatest sins according to their scriptures.
All right, so you see here that the hatred that they had for the Prophet ﷺ, for people other than themselves, blinded them to the truth and the reality. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove that hatred from our hearts and that clouds our vision. Because sometimes someone we may not like and we may have differences with, they'll be telling us the truth, but we refuse to listen just because we don't like the person bringing that information. And that's something we're doing ourselves in dishonesty. Right? If someone we don't like is telling us something that we need to know and it's true, and we refuse to listen just because this person, we don't like them, then we're setting ourselves up for putting ourselves in a bad place. All right, go ahead.
One particular incident infuriated the Jews more than anything. While the Prophet ﷺ was in Makkah, he used to pray in front of the Kaaba, with the direction of Jerusalem to the north. Facing a specific direction during prayer is a symbolic act, since Allah is not bound by any particular space. In Medina, the Prophet had to choose either between Jerusalem to the north or Makkah to the south. He was instructed by Allah to pray towards Jerusalem, and the Jews were very happy because they used to face the same direction in prayer. It made them feel as if the Muslims were following them. But the reality was that Islam taught them to respect both children of Abraham, since one of them built a temple in Jerusalem, while the other built the Kaaba. Both sites were safe. However, just before the Battle of Badr, verses were revealed to the Prophet that the Muslims should now face toward Makkah. This was more than a mere symbolic change. It was clear that Islam was making a fine line of distinction between itself and the religions of Judaism and Christianity. Islam was not merely a copy, as some might wrongly assume, but a reconnection with the message of Ibrahim, which had been lost for so many generations. It also made it clear that Makkah was not lost, but rather the Kaaba would be cleansed of idolatry in the very near future. It strengthened the resolve of the Muslims while upsetting both the Jews and the Quraysh.
So yeah, the Prophet ﷺ here, it just makes it clear. The Prophet ﷺ did many things to distinguish and differentiate between the practices of the Jews. For example, anyone give me an example? Fasting what?
In the Muharram, when the Jews were fasting the 9th, one day,
Yeah.
the Prophet said we fast 2 days.
So prayer fast 2 days. Good. Jazakumullah khair. What else? The Jews are not allowed to pray with their shoes on. We're allowed to pray with our shoes on. As long as there's no najasa on our shoes. We don't do it here because it's carpet and it's properly dirty, but if we ever in a position or situation where we can have to pray with our shoes on, that's permissible. Also, the fact that we are able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anywhere, yes, it's more rewarding to pray in the masajid, but sometimes some group of Jews that can only pray in their synagogues and stuff, we can pray anywhere. That's why we can do tayammum anywhere. So there are many things that happen. Also, the Prophet encouraged the dyeing of hair. Right? If a person's hair gets white, Prophet encouraged this. There's many things. Prophet was making it clear that Islam is different. Islam is different. Islam is unique. And this is something that we as Muslims should understand. Yes, we do respect people's rights to follow their own faith, but Islam is something that we believe is unique, going back to the tradition of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Alright, the treachery of Qaynuqa. Let's have Umair.
A few months after Badr, the Prophet sallallahu, alayhi, received intelligence that the Jews from the tribe of Qaynuqa, who lived inside Medina, were planning to break their covenant. The Prophet ﷺ had already taken note of their open hostility against Islam, but he had to make sure that the information received was correct. He visited them to see how things were, but they gave him a very cold answer. Just because you defeated an army of Quraysh doesn't make you anything special. If you were to fight us, you would see what we were really made out of. The Prophet ﷺ was convinced that relations had turned sour and something had to be done. Only a few days later, an incident occurred which added more fuel to the fire. A Muslim lady was shopping in the market of the Qaynuqa. As usual, when some Jews began to harass her, she cried out for help and a Muslim man arrived at the scene. A fight took place, leaving dead one Jew and one Muslim. As agreed upon, the Prophet ﷺ should have been consulted in order to resolve the incident according to the principles of peace and justice. But instead, the Qaynuqa prepared for war, hoping that some of the hypocrites would come to their aid as promised. The Muslims had to react quickly. They gathered an army and besieged the fortress in which the Qaynuqa had gathered. The hypocrites broke their promise to the Qaynuqa, just as the latter did with the Muslims. After 2 weeks, without receiving any supplies or outside help, they surrendered. Such treachery was worse than war. According to almost all forms of international law, the fighting men should have been killed, but they pleaded with the Prophet ﷺ to spare their lives. His kindness got the better of him, and he decided to let them live. However, he was no fool. The Qaynuqa were too dangerous to be left inside the city walls of Medina. Their belongings were confiscated and they were kicked out of the city. They took up residence with some other Jewish tribes around the area, but instead of appreciate the Prophet's allegiance, their hatred grew even stronger.
Right, so the Prophet said, I'll show you that. Muzammil, come here for a second, please. So there was sit over here. There was a lady who came to shop from some of the Jewish people in the market. So when she sat down, all right, get up. They pinned her dress, so when she got up, her back became exposed. And they were laughing at that. Didn't really work, but anyway. So what happened is that her back became exposed because at that time they didn't have layers of clothing that they would wear. They just had like an outer garment. So when her back became exposed, they were like laughing at her, and she was like terrified. How embarrassed would a person be if like her back and her whole body becomes exposed? Any of us would be embarrassed, right? So one of the Muslim people saw this, and then he went to try to defend her. And then there was a skirmish that happened. One Jewish person ended up dead. One Muslim person ended up dead. But this was, they felt like this was an attack on what the Muslims held and held as valuable and the practices of the Muslims. So this is what led to the Battle of Qaynuqa. Okay? Had they come and said, look, this one person, or sorry, it shouldn't have happened, then it could have been resolved. But they were emboldened. So when Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims besieged him, he didn't execute them here, and he let them go. Right? He let them go to another place. And we'll see what happens in a little bit. Alright, the Battle of Uhud. Let's have Ibrahim.
Immediately after the victory at Badr, Medina was on high alert. They knew that the Quraysh would try to attack again, but it was not known when. Since the leader of the Quraysh had been killed, Abu Sufyan became the new leader, and his initial idea of vengeance was quite childish. He mustered up 200 soldiers and attacked farms a few miles from Medina. He managed to burn some houses and plantations until the Prophet assembled an army and pursued them. They fled back to Mecca, dumping all the food they had brought with them for the journey. The Quraysh believed that they had regained some self-respect as a result of this act, and the Muslims thought that their rage might have been quenched. Perhaps there might be room for a peace agreement.
Right, so the loss in the Battle of Badr consumed the mushrikun. That's all they were thinking about, how to get revenge. Right? Their whole life became dedicated. As I mentioned yesterday, some of them said, we're not going to shower, we're not going to clean ourselves, we're not going to have, be with our families, things of that sort, until we get revenge for it. All right, go ahead, Mike.
However, in the month of Shawwal, 3 AH, the Prophet
3 years after Hijrah. All right, go ahead.
The Prophet received intelligence that 3,000 soldiers were on their way to attack Medina. The Quraysh had been preparing for a long time, and the prophets were reaped from the caravans and invested into war. The Poles in Mecca had been inciting and rousing people with their propaganda tactics for almost a year. There was little time to prepare, or the Prophet assembled an army of 1,000 soldiers and consulted his companions on whether to meet the army in the open or remain in the city and defend. He himself prepared the latter option, as did the suspicious Abdullah ibn Ubay
Was the leader of the hypocrites. Go ahead.
However, many of the companions that did not fight in Badr wanted the honor of being able to fight for the sake of Allah. The Prophet gave in to their zeal, and the army set out for Mount Uhud, about 2 miles away from Medina, where they could almost meet the enemy. On the way, Abdullah ibn Ubay exposed some signs of hypocrisy and decided to abandon the Muslim army. He didn't accept my advice to stay in the city, he shamelessly told the Prophet. He took 300 of his men back with him, leaving the Muslims with only 700 soldiers. But from the Islamic perspective, this was a good sign that the Muslim army has been purified from hypocritical forces.
Okay, this is a very important part. I forgot to mention this during Qaynuqa. The hypocrites, they can never be trusted. Never be trusted. Right? On an individual level, the Prophet says, that if he promises something, he breaks his promise. So in Qaynuqa, they promised the Jews they would help them, they didn't help them. Right here, they literally abandoned the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they had a discussion. Should we stay in Medina or should we go out to Uhud? The Prophet ﷺ wanted to stay in Medina. Abdullah ibn Ubay wanted to stay in Medina because he didn't want to fight. The Prophet ﷺ and the younger companions, they said that let's go out. So the Prophet ﷺ said okay. So he went and wore his armor. And then some of the senior companions went to the younger companions and said, you guys kind of forced the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't want to. He didn't want to go out, but you guys kind of convinced him to. So then younger companions, they calmed down, and then they went back to the Prophet ﷺ and said, we listened to your opinion, we want to stay in the city. He said, no, we made a decision, I've already put on my armor, we're going out. Right? He said it's not befitting for a prophet after he puts on his armor to take it off unless the battle takes place. So they went out. Right? And what happened when they went out to the battlefield? Abdullah ibn Ubay, he said, okay, yeah, we're good, we'll all go out. When he got there, he's like, no, you guys didn't listen to me. Like, you know how you say, like, you take your ball and you go home if you don't get your way? That's what he did. He didn't get his way. He took 300 people with him and said, we're leaving. So for the Muslims, they're like, okay, alhamdulillah, it's probably hurt, but it's just like, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to convince you if you don't want to be here? Go. All right, and we move forward. All right, good, we're going to continue.
When the army arrived at Uhud, the Prophet surveyed the battlefield. He stationed 50 archers on a nearby hill to guard the small mountain pass that could potentially be exploited by the enemy. The battle began and the Muslims were outnumbered again, but by the help of Allah they began to overcome the Quraysh. The battle flag of the Quraysh fell and they began to retreat, while the Muslim soldiers continued to pursue them. At that very moment, a mistake occurred which would change the victory to a defeat. The archers who were positioned on the hill decided to leave their posts. Their leader ordered them to stay where they were, but their eyes were hypnotized by the spoils of the war, which they were eager to collect. The spoils left behind by the enemy soldiers were like a salary to the army. They were afraid if they didn't collect it quickly, there would be none left for them.
So Prophet ﷺ stationed them on the Archer's Mount, which is still there, still stands today. Do you remember? Did he come with the summer brother there? Oh, he wasn't there, okay. Because their family, the family went to we went there too, together. They're still there, right? The Archer's Mount, and they left that position. And as you see, Khalid was not a Muslim at that time. He was just looking for a strategic opportunity, so he came from the back, and he had the Muslims were enclosed on both sides, and they ended up losing the battle. And not only that, subhanAllah, it's just, if you look at some of the things that happened, sallallahu mentions it, discusses it a lot in his book. A lot of Muslims made shaheed, there's like 80 wounds, and you can't recognize some of the companions, you could only recognize them by the tips of their fingers, that's all. But one of the things, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman radiallahu anhu, Hudayfa was known as the keeper of the secrets of the Prophet ﷺ. Very close to the Prophet ﷺ. He was the one known as the keeper of secrets, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said that I would ask him about all the bad things, while people would ask him about good things, because I was afraid that we might fall into it. And he was the one, the Prophet ﷺ told him the names of the hypocrites. His father, Yaman, was killed by the Muslims during the Battle of Uhud because of the chaos. Right? And this was something which was very difficult, but the Prophet ﷺ paid the blood money and everything was okay, but it just shows the chaotic nature of that, of what happened. Alright, go ahead, Ibrahim.
Khalid ibn Walid, from the Quraysh, was an excellent military strategist. He immediately noticed that the mountain pass was now unprotected, and led his horsemen around the back of the mountain. Just as the Prophet had suspected, there were only a few archers left on the mountain, and they were taken out pretty quickly by Khalid and his forces. After the fleeing soldiers of the Quraysh turned around and launched a counterattack. The Muslims were squeezed from both sides. Most soldiers didn't realize what was happening. Just as they were beginning to make sense of the situation, the Prophet was knocked off of his horse, and a rumor began to spread that he had been killed. Some of the companions were on the verge of giving up when the rumor proved to be false. The Prophet is here. He's okay, someone shouted. Both Muslims and the idolater rushed towards him, one intending to defend while the other was intending to attack. The companions surrounded him and shielded him from arrows and being fired in his direction. The sword managed to make its way through the shield and hit the Prophet in his face. Throwing him down onto the floor, he lost one of his teeth and two chain links from his armor, sunk into his teeth. Despite the gravity of the situation, the Prophet only said, Allah forgives them for their ignorance. Many companions gave up their lives defending the Prophet during his bloody episode, but their lives were not in vain. The Prophet and his companions managed to fend off the onslaught and extended the peak of the hill where the enemy could not reach them. Abu Sufyan made his way to the hill and shouted, "This is revenge for Badr."
Alright, so here some of the companions, for example, Talha ibn Ubaydillah, he became paralyzed in his hand after this incident. He lost fingers because he was defending the Prophet sallallahu, alayhi, wasallam. There's another companion, the name is slipping me right now, but his tooth became chipped because he's the one who put his mouth and his teeth on the face of the Prophet ﷺ and pulled out the shrapnel or the armor that went into the cheek of the Prophet ﷺ. So he always had that chipped tooth because of that reason. That's why when we talk about the companions of the Allah, no matter what we do, there's certain things that we cannot match them in. Right? None of us can be like there defending the Prophet ﷺ physically. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was given arrows at the time at Uhud, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "May my mother and father be ransomed for you, throw them in the name of Allah." Right? The Prophet ﷺ appreciated what Sa'd did. So all of these things, the Battle of Uhud, it shows you the importance of the Prophet ﷺ and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedience to the Prophet ﷺ. Why did the Muslims lose this? Because they left the post the Prophet ﷺ had placed them at, but it also shows you the resilience. The resilience of the companions, the resilience of the Prophet ﷺ. It was a difficult situation, they made a mistake. But that doesn't mean our mistakes don't define us. Right? We make a mistake, we make tawbah, and we get up and we move forward. Alright, Jazakumullah khair, Ibrahim. Question, continue please.
70 Muslims lay dead on the battlefield while only 22 Quraysh were killed. Unlike the Muslims, pagan Arabs had little respect for human corpses. The bloodthirsty Meccans mutilated the bodies of the fallen Muslims and their body parts were worn as trophies. The Prophet was particularly grieved by the loss of his uncle Hamza, whose body had been severely disgraced. The corpses were buried and the Muslims headed back towards Medina. The Prophet's face continued to ooze out blood until his daughter came and cauterized the wound.
Using fire to sometimes they close the wound with fire.
The victory at Uhud had turned into a bitter defeat. Verses were revealed to the Prophet making clear that the calamity was a result of the spiritual disease of greed. But the verses also indicated that Allah had forgiven those people since it was a momentary lapse on their part, rather than an intentional act of disobedience. The Muslims had learned a great lesson. They would not be guaranteed victory unless they acted in accordance with the principles of Islam.
This is something we should underline, highlight, and we will not be given izzah by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we follow the principles of Islam. Yes, we may get temporary worldly benefit, but as far as the peace, security, tranquility, and safety, we won't get that unless we follow Islam. Right? And that's something we need to remind ourselves of over and over again. SubhanAllah, you see how the Prophet ﷺ, and it's just, when you talk about the Prophet ﷺ, it's even difficult to imagine how he had the ability to have that generosity and that empathy and that ability to forgive. So one of the people that was responsible for Hamza radiallahu anhu's body being mutilated was Hind. Hind was the wife of Abu Sufyan, and it is in some narrations they had his body mutilated, they had his liver cut open and she bit from it and things of that sort. Later on she becomes Muslim, and there's a group of women that are asking the Prophet some questions. And one of them asks him a question, and he recognizes her voice, because he knows Abu Sufyan's the Prophet's distant cousin. So they're from the family. So he's like, "Are you Hind?" And she says, "Yes." And he's like, he didn't say anything. And then he asked her, she has a question to ask. And what's the question she asks? She asks that, can a wife take from the husband's wealth without the husband knowing if the husband is stingy? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, as long as it's enough for take whatever you need for you and your children. So she comes later on complaining to the Prophet about the stinginess of Abu Sufyan. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ doesn't hold anything against her. It doesn't say that don't talk to me, don't do this to me, get away from me, I want nothing to do with you. So you see the mercy and the rahmah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's easy to say, forgive people. It's very difficult to do it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to follow that sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. Alright, preachers murdered. Let's have Osama.
Loss at Uhud was not only physical but also moral and reputation of the Muslims. It gave a clear sign to the neighboring tribes that the Muslims were to be one with one. Tribes of Udal and Qura requested the Prophet to send some Muslims to teach them about Islam, so they might consider accepting it. The Messenger of Allah dispatched 6 eligible Muslims to the region. However, they were ambushed by Rajia on the way by 200 archers. 4 of them were killed while the other 2 were captured and sold to the place to be tortured and executed. A few months later, the tribe of Amir requested the Prophet to send a large group of Muslim teachers to educate the entire tribe about Islam. The Muslims had learned their lesson and were on their guard. The tribe of Amir was very powerful and gave their word that they would protect the Muslim teachers. Prophet ﷺ sent 70 Muslims, mostly from the people of Sufa, to teach them about Islam. However, it turned out that some of the allies of Amir were corrupt. They intercepted the unarmed Muslim delegation at a well called Ma'una and killed all of them, except one who managed to escape.
Alright, so 2 incidents that happened: the tragedy of Rajia. Rajia is also a water source, and the tragedy of Bit Ma'una is that there were Muslims that were sent as ambassadors to give da'wah, and people betrayed them, and they ended up killing them. And this was something which was very difficult. The Prophet ﷺ spent, I think, months, or at least a month or more, making dua against these specific tribes in qunut. That's why qunut nazila. Remember, sometimes we do that when there's some tragedy that happens in the Muslim ummah, or some hardship, like Muslims are being attacked somewhere. We pray and we do qunut in the last rak'ah of every salah. Why do we do that? Where do we get that from? From these incidents, right? So imagine a person, imagine our father, some people going to another land to be as ambassadors of Islam, and then they're getting killed. Right? And that's very difficult. That's very difficult, and the Muslims experience that. Who are the people of Sufa?
There was a place were they like a prison? And
No, not a prison. It was like a home. It was remember in the masjid, the elevated platform, where the poor people of the companions of the anhum, they used to stay in the masjid. So the people knew them. There were people that used to stay every time they used to come to the masjid. There were people basically that dedicated themselves or didn't have other places to stay, so they'd take some of them home. So the people and these were Qur'an, the people who knew how to read Qur'an, the people who were teachers of the Qur'an, and they were the ones who were made shaheed in this incident. Alright, expulsion of Nadir. Let's have yeah.
So you also probably do the same thing on the elevator?
Yeah. The Sufa is the elevated platform.
Oh.
Alright, good. Sam, continue.
In Rabi al-Awwal, after Hijrah, the President of Allah received intelligence that the Jews of Nadir were planning to betray the Muslims. The Prophet went to visit them in order to set things right, but they made an attempt on his life. He fled the scene and issued an ultimatum. They had 10 days to leave with all their possessions, but they insisted on war and began to make alliances with some Arab leaders. The Prophet again had to act fast. The Muslim army was sent to besiege the Nadir fortress. After 10 days, the Prophet ordered that some of their palm trees, their most valuable possessions, be cut down. They knew they were watching and hoped that it would put pressure on them to surrender, seeing that there would be nothing left for them if they continued to go to fight.
Alright, so there's a whole, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, there's a surah in the Quran that he used to call Surah Banu Nadir. Alright? We actually recited it, not last time, before. Surah Al-Hashr. Surah Al-Hashr is all about the expulsion of Banu Nadir. Right, ما قطعتم من لينة أو تركتموها قائمة على أصولها. Right, lina is a palm tree. Right, so they made an attack on the life of the Prophet. So they made an attack on the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals Surah Al-Hashr after that, and we'll see what happens here. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ هم قوم أن يبسطوا إليكم أيديهم فكف أيديهم عنكم واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. Is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, remember Allah's blessing upon you when a group of people tried to attack you, but Allah prevented them from attacking you, and He protected you. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them, and He told them they have to get out. They said no. right? And يُخْرِبُونَ بُيُوتًا بِأَيْدِيهِمْ وَأَيْدِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And then they fortify themselves. What happens? Someone continue.
They finally surrendered and tried to negotiate for leniency, as the Qaynuqa received. However, the treachery was much worse. Not only did they attempt to murder the Prophet ﷺ, but they were even given the opportunity to leave with all their belongings. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ had already witnessed the captains of Badr returning to fight again at Uhud. But his leniency knew no bounds, and he allowed them to leave with whatever belongings they could carry. They relocated to the heavily fortified city of Khaybar, a few hundred miles to the north. Again, rather than expressing any appreciation, they immediately began to plot against the pursuers from afar.
Alright, so the first group of the Jews that the Muslims interacted with or had hostilities was Qaynuqa. What happened to them? Did the Prophet ﷺ kill them? No, they were told to leave. Alright, second group was Nadir. Did the Prophet ﷺ kill them? No, they were told to leave. What did Qaynuqa do? About the woman. They pinned the dress, right? So they had an attack on a Muslim woman, and then that's why they started the hostilities that way. What did Nadir do? They attempted to kill the Prophet ﷺ. Alright, now let's see. Next. Alright, let's have Mudassir go.
The battle of the trench against the allies.
Huyay.
Huyay, the chief of the Nadir, went to Mecca to incite a final attack against Medina. He easily managed to convince the Quraysh that it was the time for one final assault against the Muslims.
Okay, chief of Nadir. Okay, Nadir is, who is Nadir? What are they mushrikun? Are they munafiqun? They're Jewish tribe. So Nadir is a Jewish tribe, and the chief Huyay is, what is he? He's a Jew, right? Everyone's with me? Okay, alright. Well, let's go come back to that. Go ahead.
Abu Sufyan began to recruit allies from different parts of Arabia. The Quraysh managed to muster up 4,000 soldiers themselves with another 6,000 soldiers coming from the eastern part of Arabia called Najd. As soon as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam received the news about the massive army, preparations to defend immediately began. A decision had to be made whether the 3,000 strong Muslim army would go out to meet the enemy or remain within the city. Salman, who was originally from Persia, suggested a foreign war tactic of building a trench around the unfortified parts of the city to keep the enemy at bay. It was a huge project, but it made easier by the fact that there were some mountainous terrains surrounding Medina which cavalry would be unable to cross. The idea was accepted, and all the Muslims in the city began to dig. After 2 weeks of full-time effort, there was a 15-foot deep trench virtually surrounding the entire city. Before the battle began, the hypocrites made various excuses and abandoned the Muslims. When the coalition army arrived, they were shocked. The Arabs had never seen such a military strategy in use before, but the Quraysh had their tactics as well. They sent a large part of the army to the north of Medina so that the Muslims would concentrate their defenses in that region. This would leave the south unguarded, where they could attempt to cross the trench. It so happened that the only remaining Jewish tribe in Medina, the Qurayza, lived in the south. Qurayza, who accompanied the allied army, paid them a visit and convinced them to defect from the treaty with the Muslims. When the Prophet ﷺ heard of this treachery, he sent archers to defend the south, but concealed the information from the Muslim army. They were in enough trouble as it was, and he didn't want them to lose hope by hearing that their southern defense had been compromised. A few of the Quraysh soldiers managed to jump a narrow part of the trench, but they were killed by Muslim soldiers on the other side.
Ahzab, as the whole surah reveals, means like the coalition, different groups coming together. So what Banu Qurayza here did was that Banu Qurayza was supposed to be neutral and at least defend the city of Medina, because if that became exposed, and the women and children that didn't go out to the battle would have been exposed. So Huyay went there and convinced them to leave their post so that the people could come in, and then some of the women and children fought them off, and then the Prophet ﷺ sent archers there. The siege lasted for about a month, and then we'll see that the Prophet ﷺ, he sent, I think it was Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, to the other side, past the trench, to get information. And this is very interesting how this happened, is because usually when the Prophet ﷺ would tell people Yes, Hanzala actually. And he would tell people to do something, ask to do something, they would immediately stand up. He asked once, no one moved. It was cold, it was, we're very, very windy, no one moved. Second time, he told them to get up. Who would want to do that? No one got up. Third time, no one said anything. I think it's Al-Hudayfa. I'm not Hudayfa Hamdulillah, the companion. He said, get up. He said, go. Get me news from the other side. And he said, don't do anything unless I tell you to. So he said that I went, and he said, I was very scared, very nervous. It was very cold. I didn't want to go, but when I got up, I started to go. Alhamdulillah, I felt very calm. And all of those things I was worried about were gone. And he said, I saw Abu Sufyan, like right in front of me, and I could have killed him if I wanted to, but I remember the words of the Prophet ﷺ ordering me not to do anything without his permission. So I let it go. He just got intel and came back. And there are other people, remember, the coalitions that are based on falsehood, they are very flimsy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, تَحْسَبُهُمْ جَمِيعًا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى. You think that their hearts are together, but they're really scattered. So what ended up happening when they couldn't get past the trench, some of the Jewish tribes, some of the Quraysh, people from Quraysh, and some of the people from Najd, they started having their own internal arguments and dissension and discord. Right? And that's eventually how they ended up leaving. Alright, let's have Salman, go ahead.
The siege lasted for almost a month. It was very cold and windy at night, and the Allies were almost out of supplies. Some of the groups began to leave, and there were rumors of betrayal within army ranks. Abu Sufyan finally decided to give up, and the allies returned unsuccessful. With the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only were the Muslims saved from fighting, but it was a symbolic victory for them. The tides had turned, and Medina was never to be attacked again.
Yeah, the Prophet said, now we're going to attack them, they're not going to attack us anymore. Alright, what was the leader of the Banu Nadir tribe? What was his name? Huyay. Alright, a Jewish person, Huyay. His daughter ends up becoming Muslim, and the Prophet ﷺ marries her. Her name is Safiya bint Huyay radiallahu anha. Very important point here is that we don't judge children by what their parents do and vice versa. I've seen many times, even in our own communities, people will stigmatize either parents or children. Oh, that's that person's son, that's that person's parent. No, look, each person is different. Each person is different. Each person has the ability to accept, do right, do wrong. We take people as individuals. No one can bear the burden of another person. The other wives of the Prophet ﷺ used to teach her a little bit because they say your father's a Jew and your uncle is a Jew. So Prophet ﷺ told them, to tell her, no, my father is a prophet and my uncle is a prophet. Meaning going back to Musa and Harun alayhi salatu wasalam, which none of the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ could claim because none of them had Jewish ancestry, right? And Safiya radiallahu anha, she comes from the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Alright, dealing with the traders of Qurayza. Alright, let's have Salman continue. This is the last section we'll do today, and then we'll finish tomorrow, inshallah.
The threat was over, but there was no time to rest. The Prophet ﷺ immediately gathered 3,000 soldiers and set out to take care of the traders from
Qurayza, yeah.
The Muslim army surrounded their fortress and cut off all their supplies. They put up a fight for almost a month, but because they were very well aware of what they had done and knew what fate awaited them. Finally, they gave up and pleaded for mercy. The Prophet ﷺ had already been lenient with the other two Jewish tribes, and it was sending a signal in Arabia that anyone can betray the Muslims and still get off easy. But the crime of Qurayza was much greater than that of the Qona or the Nadir. Their treachery occurred during an attack on Medina and would have led to the extermination of the entire Muslim community. They were not only guilty of breaking the covenant or trying to kill one man, but of almost killing the entire Muslim society. The Prophet ﷺ decided to be lenient to them in another way. He allowed them to choose who would determine what should be done with them. Before Islam, the Qurayza were allied with the Aus tribe against the Khazraj and other Jewish allies. They decided that a man from Aus should be selected to determine their fate, since they had such cordial
good relations.
The Prophet ﷺ chose one of the leaders of the Aus, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, to decide the judgment. Sa'd ruled that the fighting men be killed and the women and children be taken as foreign captives. This verdict was in accordance with Jewish law according to the Torah, and no one contested it. The message to the rest of Arabia was loud and clear. The Muslims may be lenient but will not be taken advantage of.
So the Prophet ﷺ here, after Banu Qurayza, after the Battle of Ahzab, the Prophet ﷺ was going to take off his armor, and Jibreel ﷺ came to him and said, "Why are you taking off your armor when the angels who participated with you in Battle of Ahzab haven't taken off their armor? Go to Banu Qurayza." Right? So immediately after Ahzab, they went to Banu Qurayza. To the extent, there is a very important fiqhi point that comes from this. The Prophet ﷺ told the Muslims, go to pray Asr in Banu Qurayza. Right? Pray Asr in Banu Qurayza. So when the Prophet ﷺ went there, one group of companions took it literal. So they got to Banu Qurayza and they prayed Asr there. Another group, they took it metaphorical, meaning the Prophet ﷺ told us that because he wanted us to go quickly, but they prayed Asr on the way. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that's okay to both groups. So what do we take from that? Sometimes in fiqh, right, there's a statement of the Prophet ﷺ which is looked at in different ways, but as long as they're interpreting the same text, the text is authentic, then it's okay. There's no problem with that. I'll give you an example. It's not relevant right now, actually, because moon sighting, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Sumu li ru'yati wa aftiru li ru'yati." Fast according to its sighting, and break its fast according to its sighting. The hadith is, that's all the hadith says. The difference of opinion sometimes comes is who is being addressed by that. The people that take local sightings and the people in the locality. They're the ones who should sight and they're the ones who should break their fast. Other people say, no, it's a general rule. So anyone in the ummah that sees it, break it and that's enough. If someone in the ummah says, that's where global sighting comes from. So global sighting and local sighting, what is it based on? It's the same hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. One hadith just looked at it from different perspectives. That's fine, as long as the asl, the core, the text is the same, right? So both opinions would be fine. All right, let's continue. Oh, so yes, this did happen. They did, right? Sometimes I want to highlight this point too, is that if the Prophet ﷺ, right, first incident that happened with the Jewish tribes, he had them executed and taken captives right away. But then, so what some of the Islamophobes say, they might have a little bit of, we can try to say that, yeah, maybe it's kind of, I'm not saying it's wrong, but at the same time, it's difficult conversation to have. But if you know the history, what happened with Qaynuqa, what happened with Nadir, and now what happened with Qurayza, then you see the Prophet ﷺ was trying to close this pattern that was happening. And he let them choose. Choose one of your allies. And that ally, who was previous ally, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he ruled and he said, we're going to rule what's in their text. Let alone in our scriptures. Let's see what they say in their text. And this was the ruling that was found in their text. And the Prophet ﷺ said this was acceptable. Alright, inshallah, we'll stop here and we'll start with Treaty of Hudaybiyah tomorrow. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us understanding of our religion. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which is beneficial and allow us to benefit from that which He has taught us. He is the all-knowledgeable and the all-wise.